waiting for permission is the day your life actually begins. Hello, and welcome back to the Soft but Savage Method, Conversations in Becoming. I'm your host, Mickey Garcia, and this is episode 5. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to talk just briefly about something that's kind of been unfolding as this process goes forward. When I first started this podcast and started writing episodes and sat down to record them, I thought I was just recording individual episodes that, yes, they were related, but they weren't really closely connected. Really, what I've discovered over the past few weeks is that we're building something much bigger than that. These conversations are not random, and they're not just connected. They're really chapters in a journey. So from this point forward, we're going to start thinking about this podcast in seasons, which I know a lot of people do. This first season is called Becoming Yourself Again, because every conversation that we have here is helping us come home to ourselves, one honest conversation at a time. Today's conversation is going to build on the issues we talked about last week around where you learned that your needs didn't matter. And this might just be one of the biggest steps in that journey because so many of us are just waiting until someone tells us it's okay. Waiting until everyone agrees. Waiting until we feel completely confident. Waiting for permission. So let's talk about that. First, I want to talk about what permission seeking actually looks like. Our becoming moment associated with this is that permission seeking doesn't always look like asking for permission. When we hear the phrase permission seeking, sometimes we picture somebody literally asking someone else for permission. That's not really always the way it looks. Permission seeking is actually much quieter than that. It's rewriting a text message 5 times because you're worried about how it might be received. It's telling 3 friends about something that you've decided on before you really even know what you want to do. It is over-explaining a boundary that you have because you want to make sure everyone understands and approves. It's apologizing for just taking up space. It's delaying some decision because you're waiting on someone else to validate what you already know. The truth is, though, that most of us, we aren't really asking for permission. We're looking for reassurance. And reassurance isn't wrong. It becomes a problem when we stop trusting our own voice without it. One of the things that I ask women in coaching is this. If no one else had an opinion, if there was nobody else around that could give you their opinion, what would you choose? And that question can sometimes make us feel really, really uncomfortable. Not because we don't know the answer, but because we've spent so many years believing that everybody else's opinion mattered more than our own. That is permission seeking. But it's not weakness, it's habit. And habits can be changed. Now I want to talk a little bit about why we learn to wait for permission. So none of us are born believing that we need someone else's permission to exist fully. We learn it. Maybe you grew up in a home where keeping the peace mattered more than telling the truth. Maybe you were praised for being easy, the responsible one, the helper, the one who held everything together, the one who never caused problems. And over time, your nervous system then learned something important. And we've talked about this a little bit in our past episodes. Approval feels safe. Disappointment then feels dangerous. So our becoming moment then is this. Approval feels safe and self-trust feels unfamiliar. That doesn't mean it's wrong. And I know this is true for me. When I look back at my marriage, I can see how often I looked outside of myself before I made decisions. Not because anybody ever told me that I wasn't capable, but because somewhere along the way, I learned that making everyone else comfortable felt safer than disappointing someone. So before I spoke up, I would rehearse it. I had hundreds of conversations with my husband, completely inside my own head, because I wanted to make sure that when I brought something up, I I didn't word it in a way that it would upset him or make him angry or hurt his feelings that then would cause an argument. Before I would make a decision, I would think about how it would make everyone else feel, because I didn't want anybody else to be unhappy. Before I would trust myself, I would look around and kind of try to gauge if anybody else approved or if everybody else approved. Because, if somebody else agreed, it was probably the right decision, right? I mean, that's how we think. At the time, I didn't really think of that as permission seeking. I just thought I was being thoughtful and smart about my decisions. Looking back, though, I can see that I had stopped treating my own voice like it mattered. And that is exactly what happens when we've spent years thinking that approval equals safety. You become thoughtful. You become considerate. You become the person that everyone else can count on. And that was me. Those qualities are not bad. In fact, many of them are really beautiful. So the problem isn't kindness per se, right? We definitely want to be kind. The problem is when our kindness starts to come at the expense of our own voice. Eventually you're going to stop asking, what do I want? And you start asking, what will everyone else think? Come on, that's exhausting. It's draining. And you end up feeling like you don't even know what you want anymore. You've silenced that internal voice for so long that you don't feel like you can trust what it says. And this is one of the biggest reasons that women start to lose trust in themselves. Not because they lack wisdom, right? We're smart women. Logically, we know that this doesn't make sense, right? But we've stopped practicing listening to ourselves. So finally, we're going to talk about rebuilding our self-trust one decision at a time. After years of self-doubt and pushing back that inner voice, you're not going to just magically wake up one day and suddenly you trust yourself. The good news is you can build self-trust the same way you build any relationship with a new friend, a new coworker, a new neighbor, whatever. One interaction at a time, one kept promise at a time, one honest decision at a time. And that doesn't mean that you will never ask for advice, right? Healthy people know when to seek other counsel. The difference is this. Advice can inform your decision, but it should never replace your voice. So imagine the next time that you have a decision that you want to make, before you call your sister, before you text your best friend, before you ask your partner what they think, pause and then ask yourself, what do I think? What do I honestly think? And what feels aligned with the woman that I'm becoming? Then just listen. And maybe your answer changes after you gather some more information, and that's okay. We are not expected to make perfect decisions every single time. The goal is just to stop believing that someone else or everyone else knows more about your life than you do, and more about the things that you should choose. And so every time you trust your own judgment, even if it's something really small, that's okay. You are strengthening that muscle. You are teaching yourself that you can trust your own voice. That's how self-trust is built. Not in one big brave moment, but in hundreds of little ones that nobody else ever sees. What I'd like you to do this week is just try to notice every time that you are about to ask somebody else what you should do. And then pause. Instead, ask yourself, what do I already know? Even if you still ask for advice afterward, that's fine. But ask yourself first. So it's time for this week's reflection question. Where in your life have you been waiting for someone else's permission to become the person you already know you're ready to be? So as we close out this week's episode, I want you to give some consideration to these statements. You don't have to become tougher. You don't have to become louder. You don't need to convince everyone that you are making the right decision. You just have to practice trusting yourself, one decision at a time. Because every time you stop outsourcing your decisions, you strengthen your own voice. And that's what becoming is all about. Okay, ladies and men, if we have some joining, if today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe so that we can continue this journey together. And remember, season 1 is called Becoming Yourself Again because these conversations are designed to build on one another. So next week, we're going to be talking about something that quite often gets mistaken for kindness, and that is people pleasing. And I think it's a conversation that so many of us need to have. So until next time, keep becoming.